Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is a morning update. We've talked at length now at Bradley Edwards' book that came out today called Relentless Pursuit. Well, we have an article from the Daily Beast, and the headline is The Craziest Bits from the New Epstein Book: Jacko, Trump, Prince Andrew, and the CIA. We're going to read this article today from the Daily Beast, and it'll give you a quick wrap-up of all the stuff that we've heard from Bradley Edwards so far that he has put out there leading up to the release of his book, which happened today. And again, I've said it several times, if you haven't purchased the book yet or ordered it on Audible or wherever you listen to books, I definitely think you should do that. I'm not affiliated with Mr. Edwards in any way, shape, or form, but I think it's always important to read books that are put out by people like Bradley Edwards who have been in the mix from the very beginning. Just like I think it's important that you read Filthy Rich. They're very important add-ons to the catalog, and it gives you more context, right? It gives you the bigger picture. And as you all know, my middle name should be Context because we have to have it. If we don't have proper context, especially in this story, then it's nothing. There's nothing there because you can't look at this story piece by piece. You have to look at this story as the whole picture, or else you say to yourself, how's that even possible? How does this fit here? How does this fit there? And the only way you're able to do that is if you know the whole entire story from the very beginning. And Bradley Edwards' book, it will go a long way to fill in a lot of holes, fill in some lines there that might have not been filled out. You know what I mean? So it's important to add this to your personal catalog. And for those of us who are, thinking about this case of 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, obviously it's a no-brainer for us to read it. So we're going to jump into this article from the Daily Beast and do a wrap-up of some of the craziest bits from the book, in their opinion. Headline: The Craziest Bits from the New Epstein Book: Jacko, Trump, Prince Andrew, and the CIA. This article was written by Kate Bricolette, and it was published on March 31st. Jeffrey Epstein beckoned lawyer Brad Edwards into a private room to issue a warning. It was early 2010, and the men, who were courtroom rivals for the past 2 years, had been waiting for a deposition to begin. "How long is this going to go on, Brad?" Epstein asked, to which Edwards replied, "Till it's over, I guess." And here we are, all these years later, and it's still going on. And Bradley Edwards is still charging hard, trying to get justice in this case. And I think it's a noble pursuit which Mr. Edwards is on, and I definitely tip my cap to him for his undaunted pursuit of the truth and justice in this case, because a lot of people would have given up by now. A lot of lesser people would have given up by now. And it speaks to Mr. Edwards' character, and it speaks to the sort of man he is, the way he's pursued this case. Epstein then warned Edwards, who represented multiple survivors of the sex trafficker, that he held the advantage. "The difference is that I have an unfair power at my fingertips," Epstein said. "I hired a former MMA champion who was out there in the hallway, and I have access to all of the resources in the world. You don't even know who all of my friends are." So again, he's flexing, right? Epstein loved to do this. He had his bodyguard, Zione, I can't pronounce his name, Zianidev, something like that, a big Russian guy, an ex-MMA fighter, standing out in the hallway as an intimidation factor. And then, of course, he has to have the weird flex, "Oh, well, you don't even know who my friends are," trying to intimidate Bradley Edwards and trying to get the conversation moving in the direction that Epstein thinks it should be moving in. Typical tactic of people like this. Edwards, who details this chilling encounter in a new book, was only at the start of his 12-year legal battle with Epstein. When it began, Edwards' small Florida firm was up against a Goliath whose legal team had hundreds of employees. At one point in their court tangles, Epstein hired investigators to camp outside Edwards' home, resulting in Edwards hiring his own PIs to watch the watchers. And we've seen this several times. This is definitely how they operate. They love to hire ex-Mossad agents or ex-CIA agents or ex-cops to come and harass people. Crowd stalk them, go through their trash, etc., etc. I tell you what, Bradley Edwards showed a lot of restraint. Because if it was me, I would have made a couple of phone calls, and what they would have found is 100 people wilding out, 100 goons in the parking lot waiting for him. I wouldn't be playing no games with these people. You show up at my house, you're posted up in front of my pad, we have a big problem. A big problem. And believe you me, you're going to hear all about it. And again, I really respect Brad Edwards' restraint here, because I don't know if I would have had that restraint. I would have made a phone call, and next thing you know, the goon squad would have showed up, and it would have been a big problem for whoever was sitting in that car. Relentless Pursuit, available now from Gallery Books, a division of Simon & Schuster, goes behind the scenes of Edwards' fight on behalf of survivors of Epstein, who killed himself, allegedly, in a federal lockup last August before he could face trial in Manhattan for sexually abusing scores of underage girls. And not only underage girls, girls that were of age. And I think that narrative gets left out in this story, and I don't agree with it. I don't care how old these women were. All right? Anybody who was assaulted by Epstein or trafficked by Epstein should be in line to get a cut of this man's dough. Because I don't care the age of the girl. What he did to these girls is absolutely repugnant. Of course, the worst thing you could possibly do is abuse children. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to let him off the hook or his friends off the hook if a girl was of age. Hell no. These girls didn't want to be there. They were manipulated, they were coaxed, and they were promised the whole entire universe. And all they got was assaulted and abused by Jeffrey Epstein and his scumbag F-head friends. Edwards' tell-all reads like a thriller. From the moment one of Epstein's survivors walks into his office seeking help in 2008 to when Epstein seems to realize he's lost the war a decade later, when a federal judge ruled his controversial plea agreement was illegal. Edwards represents more than 20 of the perverted financier survivors and has called the pursuit his personal life's mission. I can understand what he's saying about that. I was never as close to the case as Edwards, obviously. I never sat there and had these girls pour their heart out to me or sit through the intense sessions of them telling him what happened. I can only imagine what motivates Mr. Edwards every morning when he wakes up, what motivates him to go after these people and to seek justice with the things that he's seen and the things that he's been privy to that we haven't seen. Because I get up every morning and I want justice too, and I spend my own time and my own resources every single day. It doesn't matter through my birthday, through a pandemic, Christmas, New Year's, Thanksgiving, Halloween, it doesn't matter. I've been right here on this podcast doing my small little part. Obviously, Bradley Edwards is a titan here, and what we do as content creators is just catalog and, keep the alarm bells ringing. But I understand about the pursuit, and I understand how he has thrown everything into this, because I am at that point as well. If I had the resources, folks, if I had the resources to really go after this case, I would not stop. I would sleep maybe 3 or 4 hours a day, and I would do nothing but pursue justice and pursue the people who took part in this. I mean, if somebody gave me a grant for a few $100,000 and said, hey, Capucci, go do whatever you want in regards to this case, Just chase it however you want to do it. Believe you me, I'd be camping out in front of people's houses, and it would be a whole new world on the horizon. And again, it all comes down to resources, right? We don't have the resources as independent content creators, most of us anyway, to go after stories like this and really be able to dig deep and shake trees and go after people that have big money, because you have to have money to catch money. If you don't have the resources, forget it. There's no way you'll be able to chase people like this down. So it's great to see a guy like Bradley Edwards, a lawyer, a man with, he has resources, I'm sure. Maybe not resources like Jeffrey Epstein, obviously, but the resources to really go after this case and to pursue justice the way it should be pursued. But the book also reveals new details about the famous and powerful people in Epstein's world, including Donald Trump, former President Clinton, and magician David Copperfield, and about Epstein's alleged connections to the CIA. Look, I've laid out the story of the CIA and Jeffrey Epstein in a pretty easy manner to follow. Not very difficult to follow the pieces and put the pieces together, especially when you compare the punishment Weinstein got to the punishment Epstein got. You see, Weinstein had all the money in the world, and he had a bunch of power that he could floss when it came to Hollywood and who was in the movies. But his power ended there. While Epstein's power, well, it came from on high. It came from places where your head would spin if you knew where Jeffrey Epstein was hanging out, who he was hanging out with, and who he considered friends. So we know that Jeffrey Epstein certainly was not doing this alone. We know this wasn't happening in a vacuum, and we know that he was not doing it without protection from people on high. Bill Clinton and Epstein shared crass jokes about women. Flight logs indicate Bill Clinton flew on Epstein's private jet more than 20 times, 27 to be exactly, including with the financier, pedophiles, girlfriend, and alleged madam, co-conspirator, British socialite Ghislaine Maxwell. In September 2002, the trio, along with 6 Secret Service agents, they had to add that. They had to make sure they threw a little bit of cover in there for Bill Clinton, because even places like the Daily Beast haven't fully wrapped their head around the fact yet that Bill Clinton is as much an enabler as Donald Trump, if not more. Okay? And those are just the facts, folks. Doesn't make Donald Trump, a better guy for being less of an enabler, but it's just the facts, okay? Clinton and Epstein were very close. And a lot of people don't want to hear that. A lot of people don't want to talk about that because they're still playing political games in this case. They're still carrying water for one side or the other. And it's unacceptable for me. I don't dig it. I don't like it. Anybody who does it shouldn't waste their time covering this case at all, because you're going to be outed for what you are. You can't hide your political swing in a case like this if you truly have it. There's no way that you could hide your political bias in a case like this without being outed. Me? I'll tell you what, as you all know here on this podcast, everyone who listens to me, everybody who knows me in person even, I want the whole entire thing to burn. Republican, Democrat, not affiliated, foreigner. I want them all raked over the coals, short, speedy trials, and fast, vicious punishment for all of them. The whole entire lot of them. Everybody who was involved needs to be absolutely, positively eviscerated. So when outlets, and again, I've given the Daily Beast a lot of credit throughout this whole thing. I think they've done a lot of really good work. But I don't like stuff like that. Along with his 6 Secret Service agents, it's read between the lines. What they're saying is, since the Secret Service was there, you can count out that Bill Clinton was involved in anything. And while we have come to that conclusion on our own, right, we've heard from the girls, we've heard from Shantae Davies, and we've heard from Virginia that they've seen Bill Clinton, but he wasn't involved in abusing them. So the Daily Beast, they couldn't help themselves here. They had to give a little love to their boy Bill by adding in, but the Secret Service agents were there. And I just point that out because, again, like I say all the time here on the podcast, it's about reading between the lines. If we don't read in between the lines and we take all of this at face value, we're never, ever going to get to the bottom of it. Traveled to Africa for a humanitarian trip that also included actors Chris Tucker and Kevin Spacey. Epstein's alleged accomplices, Sarah Kellen and Nadia Marcinkova, and Shantae Davies, a survivor of Epstein, joined them. Edwards writes that eyewitnesses, including Davies, then 23, said Clinton and Epstein exchanged somewhat crass jokes about women more than they discussed the solutions to major world problems. Look, we all know that Slick Willie is not the kind of guy you'd want to leave alone in a bedroom with your girlfriend or your wife, right? We all know that. We know he's crass. We know he is a disgusting man for the most part, right? But I'm not going to go too crazy about him and Epstein sitting around making some crass jokes. I get it. I understand that it's not, proper, and these two guys, especially when they're going on this humanitarian trip, should be conducting themselves in a better manner. But I just expect it from people like this, from the upper crust, so-called New York polite society. They don't have anything good to say about us, folks. Nothing good to say about us. And I can tell you that from experience. So I'm certainly not a billionaire or a millionaire, and probably would never even be welcomed to hang out with some of the people that I've hung out with while I've been in New York, some of my old associates and some of my old colleagues who are in the financial sector. I probably wouldn't find myself too welcome these days, to be honest with you, by my reporting on this case, because a lot of these people have ties to Epstein. A lot of these people are what we would call enablers, or their associates are. I mean, my old boss is Jeffrey Epstein's next door neighbor, folks. I mean, come on now. So I'm guessing the next time I go back to New York, I'm probably going to be ostracized by some of the folks that I used to consider colleagues and friends on Wall Street. Some of the people that have even given me some information about the case, about Jess Staley, about some of the financial aspects of the case. I probably will not be welcomed at any of their parties when I head back to New York eventually to visit family. And I'm totally okay with that. I'm totally okay with that because honestly, since I've started covering this case and since I've been involved with talking to some of these survivors one-on-one and hearing their stories, I don't want to be invited back to those sort of parties. I don't care about that anymore. That sort of status doesn't mean anything to me. For what I do now professionally, it doesn't matter to me anymore. It used to be, I'd go, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying I was hanging out in Jeffrey Epstein's circle with billionaires, right? But I have a lot of colleagues who work on Wall Street and a lot of friends who are in the financial sector. And, some of them are pretty well stationed within the street and within the financial district. And, I'd go to their parties and we'd talk about things. But now, the way I've lit up the whole entire financial sector, basically, and the whole entire polite society, which they are a part on a smaller level, obviously, but, these are the sort of people who, this is how they talk, folks. This is how they get down. This is what they do. $2,000, $3,000 benefit meals a plate, that's just commonplace for them. And when they go, they laugh at the rest of us, right? Oh, can you believe the way these people are living? Blah, 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 blah. So it doesn't surprise me that Epstein and Bill Clinton would be busting off crass jokes about women on the plane. We aren't talking about two guys that actually, we know Bill Clinton had zero respect for the vows he took with Hillary Clinton, and we all know that Jeffrey Epstein's a complete and utter animal, so them having a crass conversation about girls really doesn't surprise me. Do I think it's the proper way to conduct yourself as, supposedly one of the most important presidents in the history of America? And, supposedly a guy that's going over there in a role as a supposed billionaire for charitable reasons. Is that how they should be conducting themselves around, people on the plane? No, of course not. But it doesn't surprise me. At another point in the book, Edwards writes, I've never said or thought that Bill Clinton did anything wrong in connection with Ghislaine, Epstein, or their airplane rides. But by all appearances, Clinton had helpful information. I couldn't help but wonder why he wouldn't pick up the phone and tell us what he knew. Well, in my opinion, it's because Epstein had some dirt on Clinton. It might not have been the dirt of the actual trafficking ring or the trafficking of the girls that were in Epstein's circle, but who knows what Epstein and Bill Clinton were up to when the lights were off? Who knows what they were up to when they were hanging out solo? Who knows what sort of devious situation Bill Clinton was coerced into by Jeffrey Epstein? We know about the blackmail. We know that Epstein recorded all of the encounters with the girls and world leaders and bankers and scientists and politicians. We know all of that. So does he have a dossier on Bill Clinton as well? I don't have evidence saying that. I won't sit here and act like I know. There are too many people in this case that are covering this case that make assertions without having evidence, and it's bad for the case. It's bad for the survivors. If you don't have evidence to back up what you're talking about, and you can't point to the evidence, you should probably keep that to yourself until you vet it, or else you're going to look like you're just, throwing shit at the wall, hoping some of it sticks. Personally, on this podcast, that is never what I do. What I do on this podcast is we stick to the facts, and if I'm giving you an opinion about what I think, you'll always hear, well, this is my opinion, or you'll also hear, I don't have the evidence to prove this, but... And then we go from there. There are some people that make serious assertions who are covering this case and who are involved in this case that I think it's bad. I don't think it's good because it leads to disinformation and it gives them an opening. The last thing we want to do, the last thing I want to do as a content creator is leave them an opening on the Epstein side of things to come after the case, to make it look like it's a big conspiracy theory or a big joke. That's why I'm so rigid about the format here on the podcast, about how I go about covering this case, and about my no bullshit approach. I'm not here to mess around, and I'm not here to make friends. I'm here for two reasons, okay? One, the most important reason, justice for the survivors. And two, the second reason I'm here is I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed as a taxpayer and an American citizen that my government, anybody in the government, was involved with this. And I won't sit back and let it occur. I will not sit back and keep my mouth shut and eat my bread and watch the circus. I'm not that kind of person. I'm a kick in the door and ask you what the F your problem is kind of person. So here I am right now kicking in the door. At the very least, doing my best to kick the door in. And again, like I always say, I just do my little part here, right, folks? I don't get, you know what? For me, this isn't about personal gain. This isn't about, establishing myself as some sort of advocate or getting kudos from anybody. I don't care about any of that. I've always been a gang of one. I've always been the one-man gang. I don't need other people to co-sign for me. I don't need other people to help me. I don't need other people to do anything for me, to be honest with you. This isn't about me. This is about the two things that I just said. The fact that the American government is an embarrassment with the way they conducted themselves throughout this whole entire thing, and the survivors who deserve justice. Those are my two motivations in this case. There are zero other motivations. I'm not here to play games with nobody. None of that. I'm here to pursue these scumbags to the very ends of the earth if that's what it takes. Ghislaine Maxwell attended Clinton events while hiding from lawyers. After the Palm Beach police probe, Maxwell was difficult to track down. We learned through other sources that she was a close friend of Bill Clinton's, Edwards writes. If that was true, then surely she would attend the 2009 Clinton Global Initiative annual meeting at the Sheraton New York Hotel and Towers. We know that there are people on record saying that Jeffrey Epstein was one of the original Global Initiative donors, millions and millions of dollars to the Clinton Global Initiative. We know that. That's on record, okay? For them to act like Clinton had nothing to do with Epstein in that stupid-ass canned response that Bill Clinton's team put out, it's an embarrassment, all right? It's an embarrassment. Bill Clinton needs to be very forthcoming about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. He can't hide anymore. Mr. Clinton, you can no longer hide, sir. The attention is starting to turn onto you. And before you know it, you're going to have to answer some questions, and you're going to have to answer why you lied about being at the Zorro Ranch or about being down in the Virgin Islands. Sir, you're going to have to answer these questions eventually, because I certainly am not going to forget it. I am certainly not going to give you any sort of political cover. Just the facts here, folks, wherever the evidence leads us, and the evidence is overwhelming, that Bill Clinton and Jeffrey Epstein were very, very close friends. Edwards hired investigators to infiltrate the event and serve Maxwell with a subpoena for her deposition. To say she was upset about being publicly served at this function is an understatement. She had a profound determination to avoid her deposition, both before and after being served, Edwards says. So she's at a Clinton Global Initiative annual meeting at the Sheraton Hotel in 2009. Edwards inserts, masterfully, might I say, inserts a process server into the meeting, and Maxwell gets served in front of all of her high society friends, in front of the Clintons themselves. And at that point, the Clintons don't say, look, we can't be friends with you anymore. Of course not. They don't care, because all that the Clintons care about is enriching themselves. That's it. Point blank, period. In July 2010, Maxwell ditched the deposition, claiming she needed to leave the country because her mother was sick. Of course she did. Must be nice. It must be nice for all of these rich, all of these elite, to be able to ditch a deposition, to bounce out on a subpoena. Me or you? Forget it. They'd send Dog the Bounty Hunter after us with his spray can to drag us out of our houses. Meanwhile, this oh boy, I have there's a few names I'd like to give her, but I won't do it on air. This lady is still skulking about, dipping, ducking, dodging like she's in dodgeball, trying to avoid a wrench. And somehow she's never dragged before the court. Somehow she's never forced to answer questions. Why, folks? Ask yourselves why. And I know it's a rhetorical question at this point, and I know everybody who's been listening to the podcast for a while understands where I'm going with that. For those of you who might not have been listening for a while, you got to go back and catch up, because there's a reason Ghislaine Maxwell is protected. There was a reason Jeffrey Epstein was protected. And it has nothing to do with the fact that they had a bunch of dough. Edwards later opened the August issue of People magazine, which covered the wedding of Clinton's daughter, Chelsea. I looked at the picture of the father and the bride, briefly scanning the page beyond Bill and Chelsea. Holy shit, I thought. Who was front and center on the aisle? Ghislaine Maxwell. As it turned out, she didn't leave the United States forever. For all I knew, she hadn't left at all. Of course she didn't leave. Someone like Ghislaine Maxwell, with the contacts that she had, she could probably get her passport punched saying she was gone, but in reality was hiding out in Jeffrey Epstein's mansion. Do I know that's exactly what she was doing? No, I don't know that, but I'm speculating. We know that that's possible with Ghislaine Maxwell, with her connections at the State Department. I mean, her nephew worked at the State Department for Hillary Clinton. I know that's just a coincidence as well, right? That had nothing to do with nepotism. Funny how that Alexander DeRossi, Ghislaine Maxwell's nephew, not only worked for Clinton, but he worked on the failed Arab Spring. How's the Arab Spring looking now, folks, huh? Pretty terrible, isn't it? You have open-air slave markets in Libya. You have what's going on in Syria, getting ready to spiral out of control in the northern region. You have all sorts of fighting going on still between tribesmen. You have Yemen. And this is all on Hillary Clinton's shoulders, and the fact that she had people like Alexander DeRossi making policy in the Middle East. Now, there aren't many things that I can speak on where I'm an expert, okay? But when it comes to policy in the Middle East, that's where I cut my teeth, folks. That's where I stand my tallest and my hardest, okay? Years and years of research in the region. And what they did under Hillary Clinton with Barack Obama, with the Arab Spring, was an absolute and utter joke. Now, my point is, for bringing all of that up, is that Alexander DeRossi, who is Ghislaine Maxwell's nephew, was working for the State Department at this time. Now, he wasn't working for the State Department in 2010 when they were at the wedding here, but my point is this. Hillary Clinton has had connections at the State Department for a long time, much longer than even when she was the Secretary of State. Do you really think it's out of the realm of possibility that Maxwell could have gotten her passport punched and said she was overseas and she really wasn't? You really think that's a step too far for these people? Come on, folks. Trump gave helpful intel on Epstein. The first of Epstein's powerful friends to answer our subpoena in a meaningful way was Donald Trump, Edwards writes, adding that Trump phoned him in 2009. No deposition necessary. And this is an important part of the story, folks. I know a lot of people don't want to hear this, right? I know a lot of people, just like there's a lot of conservatives that don't want to hear the fact that I don't sit here and throw Bill Clinton under the bus at every chance I get. We stick to the facts here, okay? The fact is that Bill Clinton and Donald Trump were both enablers. All right? Those are the facts. But Bradley Edwards has said several times that Trump was the only one of these powerful people who reached out to him, the only person who was willing to talk. So I know a lot of people don't want to give Trump credit for anything ever, and I understand. Look, he's a very polarizing figure. I get why people dislike him, and I understand why people hate his policy. I get it. I'm not here to change your mind one way or the other. We don't do politics on this show. It's not my job to change your opinion on what you think politically. My job is to make sure you're informed about the facts of the Jeffrey Epstein case so that you can make a proper decision when you're looking at all of this evidence. And I've said it from the very beginning. Donald Trump is for sure somebody who enabled Jeffrey Epstein for a very long time. But when you listen to what Bradley Edwards says, it's important to make sure that we're not being biased because we dislike somebody. And it's hard for me not to just blow up on Bill Clinton because I very much do dislike the man. But I don't do that on this podcast. That is not how I roll. That is not what you folks expect from me. And that is not what I will get, what you will get. I won't do it. I'm not here for political kneecapping. Edwards writes, adding that Trump phoned him in 2009, no deposition necessary. The magnate said Epstein was a business acquaintance, they'd attended the same society events, and Epstein crafted the infamous terrific guy quote Trump gave to New York Magazine in 2002. See, and don't get it twisted. Donald Trump is another one who likes to play loose with the truth. Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein were a lot closer than Donald Trump likes to admit. And look, I get it. Nobody wants to admit they were hanging out with a pedophile. I understand. But we all know Trump likes to play loose with the truth. He should be very clear about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, and he should be willing to testify even if it comes to that point. I know that, a sitting president, that's not something that happens, obviously. I'm talking about afterwards, because Donald Trump might have some information that's important here. We know that Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell recruited Virginia Roberts from Mar-a-Lago. So Donald Trump definitely has a story to tell here, and he definitely has information that is important and pertinent to this case, and he should share that information. Trump told Edwards the last time he saw Epstein, he'd visited the money manager pedophile's home in Palm Beach and noticed young women outside. Epstein claimed the women were part of a mentoring-type program that he was involved in, which Mr. Trump thought was a bit odd, Edwards continues. Trump called Epstein strange and claimed he never really liked him, before sharing a list of names of people who, according to Edwards, would know Epstein's propensities better. See, and again, that's where Trump gets himself in trouble. He plays loose with the truth. Oh, I hardly knew him. We hardly hung out. We hardly did this. We hardly did that. So he gets himself in trouble there with that kind of stuff a lot. In 2015, when Edwards took Trump's deposition for an unrelated case, the reality star, see, this is what I'm talking about. Why can't you just say Mr. Trump or the President of the United States? There's no need for the little digs. The reality star allegedly shared more intel. He framed most of the information he had about potentially relevant leads as rumors that he had heard over the years. Still, his rumors were helpful, Edwards writes. Look, Donald Trump was 100% an enabler of Jeffrey Epstein for years. And I don't really buy the fact that he says, oh yeah, well, we broke it off and we weren't friendly. I don't buy that. I know that Donald Trump is a very shrewd man, and I know that he likes to play loose with the truth. But at the same time, I have to listen to what Bradley Edwards says here, right? Bradley Edwards isn't somebody that's friends with Donald Trump. What do you think? Bradley Edwards wants Donald Trump to get off? He has some ulterior motive to say this about Trump? It's the same thing as with Bill Clinton. And we have to follow the evidence here, folks. We can't, manifest things. We can't just hope things into existence because we don't like somebody. We have to follow the evidence. Does that make Donald Trump or Bill Clinton good people? Hell no. Both dudes are scummy and people of low moral character, in my opinion. 100%. But that doesn't make them involved with the actual abuse of girls when it comes to Epstein. Enabling? For sure, both dudes. But the abuse? Well, we don't have that evidence. So anyone who's out there spewing that sort of nonsense, spewing that sort of garbage, is sprinkling disinformation onto the story, and they're making things harder for those of us who are covering the story correctly, and certainly making it harder for the survivors. Lawyers tried to subpoena David Copperfield. The magician was a regular caller to the Palm Beach mansion, and one person Edwards sought to interview as a potential witness to Epstein's sex trafficking scheme. In summer of 2009, Edwards served Copperfield with a subpoena outside one of his Las Vegas shows, but writes that, Regrettably, we were never able to depose Copperfield due to a number of legal and logistical roadblocks. Really? Logistical and legal roadblocks, huh? For David Copperfield? I guess that was his biggest disappearing act of ever, huh? You see, this whole entire case, there's so much of this around this case. So many people that avoid talking, so many people that didn't answer depositions, so many people that didn't talk to the lawyers. And for what? What are they all hiding? Why are you all protecting a sex offender? That's really the only question that needs to be asked. Meanwhile, a victim named Johanna, who was first recruited as Maxwell's assistant, said she met Copperfield many times. Other witnesses that I had interviewed had also told me of the friendship between Epstein and Copperfield and how their private islands were located close enough for them to visit each other on occasion, Edwards writes. David Copperfield, you are now on the list. Now, we knew about David Copperfield. We knew about the names in the book, but what we didn't know is the little details, right? And Bradley Edwards puts them out here for us, and now they're actual details or actual parts of the case that we can follow. Scuttlebutt and people talking from third, fourth party, those aren't things that I chase down. Of course, I listen to everything in the case, and I research everything in this case that comes across my desk. But there are certain things that don't hunt. There are certain aspects of this case that are unprovable at this point. So you can't just be spitting from your hip and acting like you have the information and you have the proof for it if you do not, because it's no good. It does no good to anybody. But now when Edwards or somebody close to this case brings somebody up or puts them into the public catalog, well, then you know that that's somebody that we need to look a little bit deeper into and see what their involvement in this whole entire thing was. King of Pop, Michael Jackson, visited Epstein's Florida home. Johanna was lured into Epstein's orbit in part by the famous people associated with Epstein. For a young woman like Johanna, the fact that they were stars who were friends with Jeffrey and Ghislaine was an attractive bonus of the job. Even the King of Pop himself, Michael Jackson, had been enough of an Epstein acquaintance to pay him a visit in Palm Beach while Johanna was working there, Edwards says. Again, we see how Epstein did this. We saw, it's almost like what's his name? Joe Exotic, right? He lured all these people in with the tigers and meth, and before you know it, he had a bunch of straight guys that wanted to be his husband. It's the same with Jeffrey Epstein. He lured all of these people in with all of this attractive stuff, and once you were in his atmosphere, you were in his orbit, well, the process would begin for him to groom you, and this went for everybody around him, to either A, be one of his stalwart associates, or B, somebody who's being abused by him. And he used the lure of his connections and his money and his fame the same way that Joe Exotic used those tigers. Prince Andrew allegedly had sex with one victim, groped another. Epstein allegedly abused Johanna during the same time period he kept another survivor, Virginia Roberts, involved. See, I don't like the terminology they use here. Another survivor, Virginia Roberts, as somebody involved in his trafficking ring, I'll say, as opposed to what they say here. Because of this, Johanna could back up some of Roberts' claims about Prince Andrew. Roberts said Epstein and Maxwell flew her to London to have sex with the royal, an accusation Epstein, Maxwell, and Andrew denied. Oh, the three biggest liars in the history of lies, huh? They all denied it. Well, that's it, folks. Since we have the word of Epstein, Maxwell, and the Prince of Lies, a.k.a. the Prince of Punk Asses, we can all pack up shop and go home now. This case is over. We have all the evidence that's needed. Said nobody ever? I mean, really? But Johanna recalled another episode with Prince Andrew, this time at Epstein's Manhattan mansion. She described that Virginia was sitting on one of the Prince Andrew's knees, and Johanna was sitting on the other, Edwards writes. While the two girls were in his lap, Ghislaine took out a puppet figure of Prince Andrew and placed the puppet's hand on Virginia's breast, at which point Prince Andrew placed his hand on Johanna's breast. Everyone laughed. Of course they did. Of course everyone laughed, because this is how they rolled. They were used to molesting people and abusing people and having their way with girls in front of other people. Hey, look, you think that these people are normal, folks? These are not normal people that we're dealing with, okay? Go watch the movie Eyes Wide Shut, and that's basically New York high society. These people are all creepy. And I bet you a good number of these people are also into that weird-ass spirit cooking as well. These people are all sick in the head, every last one of them. Epstein and Maxwell asked young women to have their baby. Virginia Roberts said that when she was 19, the twisted couple announced they wanted her to carry Epstein's baby and to sign a contract stating the child would be theirs legally, not hers. Imagine that kind of question and what they wanted Virginia to do? Have a baby, a surrogate baby, and give that baby up to these two monsters to do God knows what with. That's going to be a solid negative. No wonder Virginia ran for the hills. Unbelievable. The surrogacy proposition came when they were in the Virgin Islands after Roberts had been involved in the Epstein sex trafficking ring for 2 years, Edwards writes. In return for the baby, Roberts would be taken care of for the rest of her life. Wow. Think about that, folks. That's how they feel about the rest of us. That's how they feel about us. Never mind how they feel about Virginia, but how they feel about the rest of us, too. What Virginia experienced is just beyond the pale and beyond the scope of terrible. I can't even imagine what the burden that Virginia has carried all these years. But what I will say is this: the way she's come forward and the way she stood tall in the face of the maelstrom and the way she's walked into the storm, that's bravery, folks. That's bravery right there. That's the kind of shit where you sit back and you say, wow. Wow. And I really respect Virginia Roberts for her whole entire demeanor at this point, the way she stands tall before the wagon, the way she says enough is enough. And the rest of the girls too, don't be confused. Annie and Marie Farmer and, the whole lot of them. The way that these girls have all come forward as a group now, as one entity, to tell these people that the party is over, it's, man, I'll tell you what, it's inspiring is what it is. This was the final straw for Virginia, Edwards continues. She couldn't bear the thought of Epstein and Maxwell raising her child. She knew that she needed to escape. The attorney says he later heard from 2 other women who didn't know Roberts who received the same proposal. Those women believe that they were the only ones who were asked to do this, Edwards writes. And we know that Epstein wanted to turn the ranch in Zorro Ranch into a baby-making ranch, so it's definitely plausible that he wanted more than one surrogate, right? So I wonder how many other girls were made this offer as well. And I wonder what happened to all of these unnamed girls that we have not heard from, folks. What happened to the young Swedish girl inside of the Dubin's kitchen? What happened to the countless other young girls who were abused by Jeffrey Epstein? The pictures, the girls he had pictures of, etc., etc. What is their fate? It breaks my heart to think about it, honestly. It truly does. Epstein called Harvey Weinstein a pig. French model scout Jean-Luc Brunel, who allegedly procured victims for Epstein and was a co-conspirator, claimed Weinstein and Epstein were buddies until the Hollywood producer visited the financier, pedophile, in Paris and tried to turn a massage by one of Epstein's girls into something sexual. Edwards writes, As the story goes, Harvey then verbally abused her for rejecting him. Little did Harvey know, this was one of Epstein's favorite girls at the time, and Jeffrey viewed the aggressive mistreatment as disrespectful to him. Edwards adds that he heard various versions of this story from others, including years later from Epstein himself, who referred to Harvey as a pig. Imagine that. And we've talked about that the last couple of days. We talked about the Harvey Weinstein angle and how Harvey Weinstein was a direct pipeline for Epstein to help his trafficking ring continue, to help Epstein along with the grooming process, so promising these girls movie roles and meetings with Weinstein, etc., if they do what he wished them to do. And that's what we've established in the last few days, reading from the excerpts from Bradley Edwards that he shared with us. So we know that Harvey Weinstein and Epstein ran in the same circles. Everybody thought that that was the case, and, there's a lot of rumor about that, right? But now we have it in black and white. We have it in black and white from Bradley Edwards, a reliable source, somebody who was on the ground, and somebody who spoke to Epstein directly. You don't get more of an ironclad statement than that. So the people that talk about, wild shit in this case, that make conjecture and speculate till the cows come home without any evidence, well, like I said, that's just not how I roll. I don't do that here on the podcast. I'm not going to do that. So it's important that once we have the information, like we have from Edwards now, that it gets added to the catalog, but not before then, not just on conjecture, not just on rumor, not just on speculation, or not just because you're trying to insert yourself into things and making things up about it. Epstein's bodyguard was sent to CIA headquarters. The former guard, a Russian mixed martial arts fighter, warned Edwards to be careful of Epstein, telling him, "You don't know who you're dealing with. He knows everybody who's powerful in this world." When Epstein was still incarcerated in Palm Beach County, he sent the Russian to CIA headquarters in Virginia, the bodyguard claimed, where the man was the only private citizen in a class of 45 people with top secret clearance. So that's normal, huh? That's normal. You could just send your bodyguard to a CIA class in Virginia, to the CIA headquarters in Virginia, where he's training with 45 other people who have top secret clearance. That's not normal behavior. That's not how any of this works. Usually it's the reverse. If you have somebody who's the head of your security or whatever, they're ex-CIA, they've already went through this training. But no, Epstein gets to send his bodyguard to go train with the CIA. I'll tell you what, why don't you go ahead and hire yourself a bodyguard and then call the CIA and ask them if you can have your bodyguard go train with 45 people with top secret clearance and see what the reaction will be when you make that request. And then flip it over and see how Epstein was received and how his request was received, even though he was in jail. Okay? He was incarcerated, and he still had enough pull to make this happen. He said he stayed 1 week. I didn't know why I was there, but he told me they would take care of me, the ex-employee said, adding, "Everyone introduced themselves and the instructor saved me for last. He did not let me introduce myself. Instead, he just introduced me as what he called a special operative." Are you guys, really, folks? Really, we need more evidence that Jeffrey Epstein was connected to the CIA? We all know that the CIA was running this whole entire thing. Don't let the people out there chirping about the Mossad get in your ear too deeply, okay? The Mossad had their role in this. There is no doubt. The Mossad definitely had their role in this, and they probably came up with the plan in the first place. But the overarching view of the plan, the overarching people who had control over it, it was, of course, the CIA. Absolutely 100%, in my opinion, the CIA was the granddaddy of this. There's no way the Mossad was operating an operation like this on American soil without the consent of the CIA. And I don't mean the director of the CIA, although he might be involved, who the hell knows. But the black operations of the CIA, the shadow cells of the CIA, the same people that are snatching folks off the streets, bringing them to black sites in Jordan and torturing them. Those people in the CIA, folks. That's who I'm talking about. At week's end, the MMA fighter said he received a book with a personalized note for Epstein. The ex-guard delivered the tomb to Epstein's cell without reading the message. He told Edwards that Epstein goes out of his way not to share any real information. He spends most of his days doing what you know he does, hanging out with his girls, getting massages. The rest is traveling with very specific missions. Most don't last very long. The girls he trusts come along. So, who wrote the message to him from the CIA? Can we track that? Where's the Justice Department bringing the MMA fighter in for a deposition? Again, I ask you, Mr. Berman, what in the hell's going on down there in the SDNY? Are you guys, at lunch? What's the deal? Alan Dershowitz's TV spots backfired, resulting in lurid tips. In early 2015, the Harvard law professor made the rounds on network TV news to attack the credibility of Virginia Roberts. This is his MO. This is what Alan Dershowitz does. And that's how you know you're on the right scent when you're dealing with Dershowitz. When he comes out with both guns blazing and trying to destroy your character and destroy the person you are, you know that you're on the right track when you're dealing with Alan Dershowitz, who claimed in a court filing that Epstein forced her to have sex with the academic, which Dershowitz denies, and also to attack Edwards as her lawyer. If causing a distraction was the goal, it ultimately backfired, Edwards writes. Dershowitz finally turned what had been a local story into national and even international news. And again, Dershowitz isn't infallible. He makes a misstep every now and then. Is he a great lawyer? For sure. Does he know the Constitution? For sure. Does he know all the loopholes within the justice system? For sure. But is he also a scumbag, in my opinion? For sure. Now, just because he's that slick doesn't mean he doesn't make mistakes. And we see that here. We see that he made a few missteps. Because Dershowitz went on national television, more witnesses contacted Edwards from New York, Paris, New Mexico, and beyond. As we were sifting through the calls about Epstein and his misdeeds, we were also now getting calls about Dershowitz himself, Edwards says. Most of them had nothing to do with any of the litigation we were involved in. Some were actually funny. Some I wish I could forget. According to Edwards, a neighbor in Dershowitz's Miami condominium shared how she would witness Dershowitz dress in a way to hide his identity while he walked the beach to look at topless girls sunbathing near their condo. When the witness told Dershowitz's wife this story, Edwards says, Dershowitz allegedly threatened the woman, prompting her to file a police report. For sure, Dershowitz is a bully. At his core, Alan Dershowitz is a bully and a creepo, in my opinion. He was definitely out there trolling, looking at ladies. He acts like he's some kind of pillar of society when he was a very close confidant of Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, come on, you only went to the Zorro Ranch for 1 hour? I've been there, bro. You're not fooling me. I know how desolate it is to get there. It takes that long to drive there from Santa Fe almost. So what were you doing there for 1 measly hour? Why did you go visit Jeffrey Epstein in jail on New Year's Day? It couldn't have waited? You had to go on, January 1st? That important, huh? No, you went because you were close, and you went because when Epstein called, you ran. Mysterious heavyweight politician received erotic massages. Some people had information about not only Epstein or Dershowitz, but also other powerful figures, and these callers were usually nervous. Look, I've dealt with that myself, talking to sources in this case. People are shook by this cabal. People are shook by the power that it wielded and the way that they were so successful with keeping people quiet when it came to talking about what was going on within the Epstein organization. So I've heard it with my own ears that people still to this day are scared of the Epstein enterprise and the remnants of what's still left. Edwards writes, a former Harvard student based in New York called with information about her 2004 visit to Epstein's private island in the U.S. Virgin Islands. She said her friend brought her to the compound and that there were underage girls present. She was very frightened to share the information, but ultimately revealed that she had been to Epstein's island twice, Edwards continues. She wasn't only scared of Epstein, but also of his very powerful friends. She knew of at least one heavyweight politician who was close with Epstein, who had received erotic massages from young females provided by Epstein. The tipster, however, feared for her life and canceled a meeting with Edwards. Yeah, well, look, when you see people like Ronan Farrow being followed by, so-called private security forces, trying to rattle him, yeah, you see what you're dealing with here. You see why people would be shook, why people would be scared, why people would think twice about coming forward. Nobody wants their life disrupted. Nobody wants to wade into this sort of fray and start fighting with these people. I don't blame them. While I have some educated guesses, I still don't know who the politician was, the lawyer concludes. But over the years, we heard from numerous witnesses, including survivors themselves, about various powerful friends of Epstein reaping the erotic massage benefits of that friendship, although it seems most of those girls' friends stayed clear of the girls who were underage. So there you have it, folks. There you have it. We have a situation here on our hands that is still a lot bigger than we've uncovered. There are still a lot more holes and warrens within this rabbit hole that we have not explored. There is so much information that trickles out in this case that if we're not on top of it and we don't stay on top of it on a daily basis like we do, we're never going to get to the bottom of this. So again, if you have not purchased the book Relentless Pursuit yet, I highly suggest you do that. Get it from the library, however you can get it. I highly suggest you read it. I just downloaded my copy today. I had it on pre-order and it came out today. So I'm going to spend some of the afternoon listening to that book and learning a little bit from Bradley Edwards, who was right on the front line when all of this was occurring. All right, folks, if you'd like to contact me, you can do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI@protonmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. Also, if you have not checked out my newest podcast, COVID-19, the pandemic that changed everything, you'll be able to find a link for that inside of the description box right here on this episode. All right, folks, I will be back later on with the Daily Drop. I hope you all have a fantastic day.